All right, so we are at the first Mozambique Climate Conference and we have with us Ishan from IPE Global. Ishan, welcome to Climate Conference.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me here.
So could you please introduce yourself and tell us about you and your organization?
Sure. So I'm Ishan. I have about 4 years of experience. I spent about 2 years working in private equity with a Singapore-based private equity fund. Post that, I joined IPE Global. So I spent about 2 years at IPE Global. IPE is basically a 25-plus-year-old development consulting firm. We work across verticals. Specifically in the climate space, we have traditionally worked with the governments, with state governments on designing of urban plans or designing of climate resilience plans. Specifically me, I work in the innovative finance and blended finance space at IPE. So we have run a healthcare blended finance facility where we have supported 90 plus startups. And I mean, in the climate space as well, we're looking to start something because we see that there's a gap. So we want to fulfill that through blended finance.
Awesome. So you're the finance guy.
Correct. You can say that. Yeah.
So maybe then I can quickly ask you, how can accelerators and incubators ensure that the climate tech startups are investor ready?
So I think it's a good question. I think that there are two things probably. One thing is that which we have seen with a lot of climate tech startups is that so they have good technologies, but what happens is that investors often look for some sort of validation, some sort of study, some sort of proof that the technology actually works. And so for these startups, they don't know how to get that validated. So one thing where accelerators can really help them is connecting them with the right industry players that can help them get that validation early in so that they become more suitable and attractive to investors. Second thing I think is that with a lot of these startups, they don't know how to pitch exactly. Again, they might be very good CTOs, technical experts, but when it comes to pitching, when it comes to developing those pitch decks, those financial models, being able to show that vision, that they struggle a bit. So in terms of helping them understand what the investors are looking for, and integrating that into their business pitches, that can really help, again, make them more investor ready.
Right. So two things. One was validation of their product and the technology.
Correct.
And second was the ability to pitch better or pitch the right way.
Correct.
So that's the two things.
I would say those would be
awesome. Great. So I'd like to ask you another question. Like, what are the biggest gaps that you see currently in the climate tech ecosystem and how can we address?
Right. So again, I think one of the biggest gaps that I see is that with a lot of these technologies, they require a lot of upfront capital, a lot of R&D capital that would go into them. Typically, we see that there is capital, but that long-term patient capital is still, it's still developing. There's still a gap there. And I think that's where we and in general, the innovative financing and the blended finance space can really come in, because with blended finance, what it does is it offers you that runway, that first initial capital to not just take care of your working capital needs, but also if it's any upfront capital that you need, blended finance can come in. So that's one thing. I think the second thing, which I think is that, again, which kind of relates to your previous question, is that investors often, so there's a category of impact investors, right? They want to see impact, but startups, there are no proper data impact measurement frameworks that exist in the industry. So if we could develop those, and those are slowly coming in as well, but once we develop those, I think that will also maybe help startups and
Absolutely. One of the great points you mentioned was how do we measure this impact?
Correct.
And I think at Climate Collective also we're trying to develop these tools to help startups at least address the gap here.
Correct.
In terms of impact.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's amazing, and it's great to know. Generally, for viewers to understand, what is blended finance?
So, in simple terms, it's in the name, right? Blended. So it means that you're taking in capital from different sources. So you will have donors and philanthropies, and you'll club that money, or you'll try to integrate that money with private capital to fulfill the needs of all the stakeholders. So the donor or the philanthropic organization is looking for some impact, and private capital wants its return. So when you integrate those two forms of capital, you're actually not only improving the risk return profile for the private capital, but you're also ensuring long-term sustainable impact, because that's how the organizations will grow over longer term.
Awesome. Very well explained. Actually, to me, I'm a layman and I couldn't really understand. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I hope you enjoyed the entire.
Of course. Thank you.